I've heard people say to me, like, I can't get into biking, it's too expensive, but they'll own a car. And it's like, you don't have to have all the gear. You don't have to have clip-ins, just wear a wool overcoat in the winter and you'll slowly and steadily get there. So, it's a lot of those different pieces, and it's not just been us. It's not just been the city. It's been really a local and to a degree statewide culture of biking is something that we should all be able to enjoy. It should be a part of our daily life, whether it's for health or environmental reasons or just because, you want to get your adrenaline pumping.
From Peloton Magazine, this is Around, a new podcast documenting the transformation of cities and urban culture, e-bikes, commuting life, and the people and brands making a difference. Episode 2 is sponsored by our friends at iGo Electric Bikes. They offer urban, leisure, road, mountain, and fat bike options with 11 models and prices beginning at under $2,000. We have one of their carbon CGB bikes in our offices, and we love it. Check them out at www.igoelectric.com. Let's get to it. We start with some e-bike reviews.
So, hey, James, so let's start by talking about the Specialized VOTO SL 4.0 EQ that you've been reviewing for Around.
Yeah, this bike I have had a ton of fun on. It's awesome. When you bike on it and you have it on, I think like most riders, I put it on turbo mode when I first get it. Like, I want to see how fast this thing can go. And when you get on and you pedal it, it just wants to take off underneath you. Like, it really pushes and it drives and it goes and it makes you want to pedal it faster, which makes it just a really fun, engaging ride. The shifting through the gears to kind of match the health the bike is giving you is really intuitive, and you just hustle. One of the other things I love about this bike is when you look at it, it's really bringing all of Specialized experience making regular bikes to an e-bike. It looks like a normal bike, and having the battery internal to the down tube and a relatively minor motor bump, let's call it, down near your pedals. Like, you wouldn't know this was an e-bike unless you were looking at it, which I really like. For instance, when I'm locking my bike up, I feel better about locking up a bike than an e-bike. I feel like the e-bike, people know it's going to be that much more expensive, that much more something someone might want to steal. So I appreciate that this is a little bit of a sleeper when it comes to things like that.
Great. Let's talk about the charging. I know you did some commuting trips on it and kind of got a sense of how far you can go, how fast you can go. I think you talked about a trip back from the beach when you had to get on a call. So let's talk about those parameters.
First of all, super easy to charge. There's just a little port near the bottom of the down tube that is easy to plug in. No big deal at all with that. There are 3 different modes with it. You've got your turbo, a medium, and then like an eco kind of mode. Turbo is the one where it's just really taking off underneath you. I was seeing speeds of like 28 miles an hour, which is just quick. And that definitely eats up some battery. So I found I got about 12 miles on half the battery, meaning you get like 24 miles about is what I was seeing for a full battery going 28 miles an hour. So, I mean, that's quick, but it definitely eats the battery. When you get down to the medium setting, I was seeing, so like about 30 miles on a full battery, going anywhere in the range of about like 20 to 22 miles an hour is what I was seeing, depending on if you're getting a little headwind or something like that. And then the like eco setting I was seeing, to me, you could get like 70 miles on a battery, which is crazy. It's a huge distance. And even still, you were going in that 18, 19 to 20 range. Like, you're still really moving. Like, that is a speed that I've seen as a top speed on some other e-bikes, which I thought was really impressive. And it's great at how easily it moves at these speeds. Like we were talking about, I live a few miles from the beach right now. And usually on a normal bike, an unassisted bike, I figure it takes me about half an hour to get to or from the beach. And the other day, I knew I had like a family Zoom, I believe it was. And I looked at my watch and I was like, oh, dang, that's in 35 minutes. I'm going to have to hustle to get home in 30 to make it in time for that. So I put the Specialized on turbo and took off. And I got home in like 17 minutes. Like I shaved so much time off of this trip, but I didn't feel like I was working any harder at all. Like in fact, it's, unsurprised with e-bike, I felt like I was working a lot less. And it shocked me how fast I got home. It's just awesome.
So talk about like, if you're recommending this bike to friends or family, who would you target this bike to?
I mean, at $3,500, it's definitely not your intro, not your, I'm a kid just out of college. It's a little steep for something like that. But it has these other features like a built-in rear rack and then like built-in lights front and back that makes it really easy to use. And also it's just so effective. So I could see someone using this bike to eliminate some trips they might have taken from the car. The rear rack, you can go to the grocery store, load it up. You can do a commute. You can do a 12-mile commute each way really fast, or you could stretch it out to 20 miles each way at a more reasonable speed. I see this as more for someone maybe middle-aged who has that expendable income to drop, $3,500 on a bicycle, but who is also looking to, be a little bit more active, both for fun and also to, do some of the chores they might have to do. If you're in a busy city, if you're in Boston and you got to run to Whole Foods or something, you don't want to park your car, I could totally see you hopping on this, bungeeing a milk crate to the back of it and being able to do those kind of errands.
So you've also been reviewing a batch e-bike, a much lower price point, and with some different features. So let's talk about the batch and what you liked about it and what the differences between that and the Specialized.
Yeah, the first thing you're going to notice is the price tag, $2,200. It's about 2/3 the price of the Specialized. And, with batch, you lose some of the refinements of the Specialized. Like Specialized with this bike shows that they've been making bikes for a long time, and these e-bike features are incorporated so seemingly seamlessly into it. Whereas with the batch, when you first look at it, it's obviously an e-bike. You've got your big Bosch battery right slapped on the down tube. The motor is a little bit bigger and more obvious there. And you, again, with like the refinements you're missing, something I noticed is like the welds where some of these tubes meet, they're big, they're bulky, they're not smoothed out like you would see on a finer bike. It's a little bit more like truck heavy duty than it is, a fine aluminum or steel frame bike. But, it is so much cheaper and it rides really well. Like I was impressed. Like it goes. And, it doesn't take off from underneath you in the same way the Specialized does. But it has 4 settings from eco all the way to sport. And in sport mode, it goes about 20 miles an hour. And it just is easy to ride. And I was actually really impressed with just how fun it was to ride at that 20 miles an hour. And the other thing I was really impressed with was at the 20 miles per hour turbo speed, you got 40 miles on the battery, which is huge. You could really do a long commute with this and be moving at a pretty good pace. Obviously, as you click down the levels, you can go further, but I found in eco mode, you're down at like 14 miles an hour. It's a bit more work. And then hills became a much bigger deal.
Who would you recommend the batch to if you're looking at the ideal consumer, family, friend, someone you would suggest take a look at the batch e-bike?
The batch e-bike for me, who I would send it to, I've actually passed it along to some of my friends. So I'm in like my mid 20s. So, $2,200 is not nothing. You just out of college, that might be an issue, but a little bit into your career, it doesn't have the refinements of the Specialized, but it works and it goes. And, it has some great features built in, like the rear rack. I really enjoyed kickstand. It lacks a built-in light, which is kind of annoying for an e-bike, but like it just is really effective. It's like it's function over form in a lot of ways. It functions very well. So I would put this to someone, young professional who doesn't have the expendable income to get the best looking bike, but is really looking to eliminate a few car rides here and there and maybe just go out and cruise the bike path on a nice sunny day. I'm James Lynch of the Round on Bikes and our podcast, and I'm here today speaking with Jeff Wiggins, Des Moines, Iowa's active transportation planner, and Mike Armstrong, American Institute of Certified Planners, transportation planner, and the Director of Planning and Communications for Street Collective in Des Moines. How are you both doing today?
Doing well.
Great. Thanks for having us on.
Great. I visited Des Moines a number of times, just in various travels, and I was delighted to find how much of an active cycling community there was in the city of Des Moines. And I think maybe not many people know that about the city of Des Moines. So to start off, could the both of you just describe what the cycling culture is like in Des Moines and how you see people using and enjoying their bikes in the city?
I feel like form follows function. Iowa is an ag state with 99 counties and nearly 1,000 incorporated places. Landform is gentle and rolling hills that I feel beckon exploration. One of the funny things about our state is that the vast majority of it, something like 97% of it, that original tall grass prairie oak savanna has been tamed down into black dirt that's converted over to ag use or residential use. So that kind of leaves few obvious places to go, and that's where people do go. Central Iowa and Des Moines have long been the beneficiaries of what I call the brain and body drain from the rural areas of the states and surrounding states as well. Mm-hmm. This means that no one in the state is more than about 5 mile ride from what I call open road, and usually no more than 10 miles from the next cluster of residences and businesses. So it's the kind of place where you can expect a nod or a raised finger in acknowledgement from fellow cyclists as you're going along your way. The obvious cultural touchstone in both Iowa and Des Moines is RAGBRAI, which you've probably come across. That's an acronym, stands for the Register's Annual Great Bicycle Ride Across Iowa. Obviously, that's not occurring this year in light of current conditions, but it's been going on for about 50 years, and it builds on the strength of the pride in small towns and Iowa nice, wholesome cooking, food that sticks to your bones and all that sort of stuff. It was the brainchild of two reporters at Des Moines Register nearly 50 years ago, and today has about 10,000 registered riders and probably another 10,000 casual participants rolling across the state over the course of the week. Tradition, of course, dip that rear wheel in the muddy Missouri and the front wheel in the mighty Miss. I think that the best way to experience Iowa is on a bike, and the most common location, as I mentioned, as a result of so much of the land being used for other reasons, to do that is along the wealth of waterways and riparian areas. Iowa was an early and regular participant in the federal rail banking, starting back in the early 1980s, and that investment and stewardship proved fertile in the long run in the development of local and regional trails that were built along abandoned rail lines. If not mistaken, in eastern Iowa, the Cedar Valley Trail connecting Cedar Rapids and Cedar Falls was the first rail trail connecting two cities in the country. So back down to the local level here, located at the confluence of the Des Moines and Raccoon Rivers, which drain much of the northwest quadrant of the state. Downtown Des Moines is the nexus of the regional trail system. When it comes to recreational trails, Central Iowa, frankly, has an embarrassment of riches. It's amazing, with more than 600 miles of paved trails radiating from the center of the city to surrounding communities, rural areas. There's opportunities for exploration that seem virtually endless. As you look at the different types of biking that happen in Des Moines and surrounding area, the abundance of county and farm to market roads in the state have given rise to the adoption and leading the way in gravel riding, as you can imagine, with an abundance of those types of roads around as well. Mountain biking, of course, has become an increasingly popular activity over the last couple of decades, and there's now something like 70 miles of single track in the metro area that is maintained by local dirt trail advocates. And then getting down to more, I think, what we focus on, utilitarian riding is robust across the city. It's common to see people riding during commute times, of course, and throughout the day. Kids in trailers, seats, or tag-alongs are a common sight, as well as the older kids riding alongside their parents. We even have our fair share of mustachioed hipsters on fixies. As with any metropolitan area, it takes all types. the most significant shift in my mind that's occurred in recent time is that since the big floods of 2008, we've added about 10,000 residents in the downtown area. And this has given rise to a notable uptick in everyday cycling in the downtown area. A couple well-used corridors leading east and west out of the downtown area are probably the most important springboard that we build upon to invigorate the effort to provide safe spaces for all ages and abilities.
Mike, yes, my understanding is that Street Collective is both an advocacy group and also a bike shop, helping people new to biking get on bikes. Have you seen a shift in the last few years, or a boom in people coming and looking to get on bikes and use that as a means of not only exercise, but some of this utilitarian usage that Jeff is talking about?
Definitely. So, yeah, we are a community-based bike shop. We don't sell anything new. We collect bike donations, refurbish those, and give those away to people who need transportation. We do bike drives for kids and all that kind of stuff too. But, we have a long history of biking here, which is fantastic, coming from sort of the RAGBRAI crowd and also from sort of an environmental standpoint of getting such a fantastic trail system in place that was very much about access to nature, health and wellness. And so those things have been really long standing. And part of that, we operate the bike share system, which is run through B-Cycle. We are actually the longest running B-Cycle operation in the US. We've been around for over 10 years now,
awesome.
Growing that effort year over year, and it's been really well received. And so when it comes down to culture, some of it is, programs that we do. I'm really, even before I joined the collective, I was always really proud of the work they had done in terms of bikes, not just being for recreation, but also for transportation and fitting those needs. I mean, we've been giving away bikes to essential workers during the pandemic so that they can still make it to their shifts, even when, transit services had to be cut back. So we feel like we are providing that service. But the interesting thing to me about all this is in the last few years, maybe in the last, 5 to 7 years, the types of organizations involved in this work. And part of that comes from our long history with biking. But AARP is a major advocate in our region and in our state for walking and biking. So again, that's outside of that, 30-year-old Strava rider.
Right.
We have organizations like Black Girls Do Bike, which has been focusing on some of those culturally specific barriers and helping new communities enjoy their community, explore their community by bike, and help integrate that into their daily life. City Ride has been running for a few years now. That's kind of a slow roll type event that for a while now has been running every Monday throughout the summer. And it is specifically about new riders. Slow pace, 5 to 6 miles, getting people to learn a bit more about the trails, the streets, where it's comfortable to ride, the things that you can get to by bike. And again, we see that focus on being a very welcoming, bigger tent kind of culture around biking. We want more people doing this. We're not acting as gatekeepers.
Is the idea there to help work past some of the, not only what I think some people see as an intimidation factor of people in the cycling community, but also that lack of knowledge of where is a safe place to bike? Are you trying to hit both of those birds with the same stone?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, when you think about this, anywhere you've ever been, I would imagine in the US, where you're biking, if you're driving, you'll check directions if you don't know how to get there. Mm-hmm. If you're biking, a lot of times you still have to check directions to make sure if the way you know how to get there is safe enough or comfortable enough. You have to choose specific paths rather than in a car, I'll drive, any single street we have. So again, there are some of those safety and comfort barriers to address. Some of it is sort of the cultural realities and also misperceptions. I've heard people say to me, like, I can't get into biking, it's too expensive, but they'll own a car. And it's like, you don't have to have all the gear. You don't have to have clip-ins, just wear a wool overcoat in the winter and you'll slowly and steadily get there. So, it's a lot of those different pieces, and it's not just been us. It's not just been the city. It's been really a local and to a degree statewide culture of biking is something that we should all be able to enjoy. It should be a part of our daily life, whether it's for health or environmental reasons or just because, you want to get your adrenaline pumping.
Jeff, my understanding is that you are the first active transportation planner for the city of Des Moines, and that position started in 2018. Is that correct?
Yep.
Awesome. What was the thought of the city in creating this position, and what were your hopes in being the first? Was it to capture this momentum and help it, or what did the city see as the need for this role?
Yeah, well, the role was created in large part thanks to the advocacy of the advocacy community. So Street Collective and their allies were instrumental in the creation of the position and in defining its role. In fact, early on, the position was located within the city manager's office, thinking that this was important enough that it would require that collaboration across the various departments at the city and interdisciplinarily. It's since moved into the engineering department, which is probably for the best because that's kind of the nexus of where actual decisions occur and where the rubber meets the road. So what drew me here was exactly that, the opportunity to improve, refine. It's a real diamond in the rough, Des Moines. I think that there's a lot going on here and a lot of culture to build upon, and the opportunity to create a meaningful and, in fact, world-class system ultimately is very much there. But taking baby steps to start, I'm simply trying to move that needle, get our mode share moving in the right direction, see more people out biking comfortably, not just those strong and fearless few who do it like a vehicular cycling, but those interested but concerned that really represent that core of the population where we can actually see the greatest increase in ridership over time. And so getting those people on bikes really intrigued me as a challenge.
And Mike, now I'm wondering, was there a real shift in how the cycling advocacy groups dealt with the city? And did having a position like Jeff's come up and to have Jeff in that position, did that help, move both the private and the public interest towards the same goal, which is getting more people on bikes? How did that relationship with the city change?
Yeah, so Jeff's position was a huge initiative for us and for a lot of our allies, and really was a rallying point, right? You can get easily lost in the weeds and miss opportunities if you're chasing project by project. And Jeff's position was a very real budgetary commitment and a way to add capacity to the city to make sure that, we weren't looking at, well, how can we make this project more bike friendly? It was, how do we make every project? How do we see that every time we're tearing up the roadway, it's an opportunity to make things better? And so, yeah, that was a really good point for us to tie in these different pieces into a interconnected advocacy community. This was a way to round out that group, to start pulling in AARP, pulling in the American Heart Association, pulling in United Way, and sort of turning this into a group that showed up again and again at city council meetings, at public meetings, with a very clear message of, here's how you can express your commitment, as well as, improve how the city is run to make sure you're meeting the goals and values that Des Moines itself had laid out for all of us.
Something that I might add in that context is, as you're well aware, probably, we have a lot of insurance agencies in Des Moines, and I think that affects the perspective from which people see the role of municipal government. And so there's a lot of focus on risk and the responsibility of our fiscal investments. And I think another argument that is fairly compelling to that specific audience is the fiscal argument. The return on investment, 12 to 1 in many studies, or the cost of operating a vehicle versus riding a bike for a mile or a kilometer, depending on the study. The cost for operating a vehicle versus the benefit to society of riding the bike. So we can draw upon studies from the national level that make that argument relating to being fiscally responsible as well. And that does play well with that particular sector within our community.
I'm wondering, coming from the bike advocacy side of things, obviously the between the RAGRI and some of these projects coming from the city, the momentum is moving in a great direction for cycling. When you think about what you want to see as a cycling and walking culture in Des Moines 10 years from now, what are some of the landmarks that you're hoping to hit to make it a more inviting place, both people who ride now and people who you're hoping to attract to the activity?
Yeah. So, as we've kind of talked about, we have an amazing trail network, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first thing anybody notices when they get here if they're going to bike. It's the thing that we, spread far and wide if we're in other places talking about what we got going. The problem is that we don't have the connective tissue leading from those trails to where people are. Mm-hmm. So how do you get to and from those trails to homes, to schools, to, grocery stores, to wherever else where more and more this can be part of your daily life rather than, going for joyrides on the weekend. Mm. So for us, our 10-year goal is, maintaining what we have for those trails. But the biggest thing is providing those low stress bikeways that are on street so that we can better integrate into the communities themselves, the neighborhoods themselves. And, I think any town or city that's done it has experience, so that's not always an easy thing to do. There's a lot of competing interests on our streets. And it's interesting, we also actually get some pushback from some of the cycling community as well, who have been, grew up, have been braving it for so long that it's part of their identity and, how they feel comfortable riding, and they don't want to be pushed off to the side in a protected bike lane or something like that. So it's an interesting mix of, friction, pressures there. But at the end of the day, when we go out and talk to organizations like Urban Dreams that deal specifically with, the Black community, lower income folks, and we talk to them about, they have over 50% of their clients showing up walking or biking. Mm-hmm. And it's not just from their zip code, it's from a pretty wide area. How do we provide comfortable avenues for them? So for us, it's about the infrastructure, but it's also about looking at the, the culturally specific barriers and challenges. I think anybody, working on, hopefully I'll say like pretty much any field right now, is recognizing the racial injustices present in our systems. Mm-hmm. So that's another piece as well. It's important that we provide ways that the greatest number of people can feel comfortable and safe out riding, whether that's safe from, traffic or safe from harassment. Either way, it's discouraging people from riding. So we're starting to take a bit more of a holistic approach that is not just about the infrastructure, but also about the other pieces that are acting as barriers to get out and ride.
Does that kind of stuff happen by working with the city and connecting to communities that may have been underserved in the cycling world before? Or does that go on the advocacy side more towards addressing the community and trying to change people's mind about cycling, what cycling is, and how they should interact with people on bikes?
Yeah, I mean, the very first part is reconnecting with communities themselves, right? One of the easiest ways to make a mistake is based on our assumptions of what people need. So we've gone back and talked to organizations and sort of especially direct service organizations that, they're working with their clients every day who are walking and biking and feeling those pressures. And one of the interesting things we heard recently was about sidewalk riding, which I think in general, many bike advocates would say, we need to provide safe infrastructure and get people off of the sidewalk because it's typically less safe in terms of collisions. But this is also a culturally specific issue in terms of, again, how they grew up, how they experience the system, the different types of dangers that are real and perceived for that community. And we need to take a step back and make sure that what we're advocating for and the types of infrastructure that we're trying to put in place is going to serve them as well, rather than trying to get them to acclimate or become more like the existing cycling community. We need to meet them where they are and provide the things that they specifically need.
Jeff, from the city perspective, when you're considering expanding into areas that may not have some of this infrastructure or have had different experiences with bicycling or the accessibility of safe bicycling, how do you address some of these things on the city side of the planning, not the advocacy, but the what actually comes to fruition?
You always get a different perspective from those who are the local experts who live and breathe these streets on a daily basis. Listen to them, refine, come back, and verify that you've heard things correctly. And so that's the typical process, whether it's for bikes or other planning processes.
The both of you working together on these issues, coming from different sides, the advocacy side and the city side, have you seen a large change in the last 2 years, Mike, since the creation of this position? And do you see having an active transportation leader within the city as an example of what other cities should do if they're looking for improvements in things like cycling and walking?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing that any advocate will tell you is that there are always parts of the process or parts of, the decisions behind behind city council can feel like a black box, right? Mm-hmm. And having this position and having Jeff specifically be a point of contact. So we're not running around to individual engineers who may be working on that project or, trying to talk to them and jumping over to public works. Jeff really does tie together so much of this work across the engineering department, but also city manager's office and public works. And he can give us that level of transparency so that we know members of the community can make their input heard early rather than trying to scramble the day before when we hear, oh, this is suddenly on city council. And, there was no indication ahead of time.
What do you think other cities could learn from having a position like yours?
There are a lot of loose ends. As Mike noted, the biking world touches a lot of city government. The touch points are myriad. So you don't necessarily know who you're supposed to speak to. This is a sewer project. Oh, what does that have to do with biking?
Sure.
This is a reconstruction of a road. Oh, go talk to the engineers. oh, this is something relating to Parks and Rec. Oh, somebody should have thought about bikes. So I think that I and this position in general inside of municipal government is the opportunity to start that conversation with all of those partners, make sure they know who you are, and just physically be in their life, encounter them on a daily basis, or now virtually occasionally. And, that'll be a gentle reminder. Oh, I should be thinking about these things as I work through my projects. I'm happy to be that person. And I think that any community could benefit from the coordination that comes from having this type of position within their government.
Something unique that I noticed in Des Moines is that it seemed that an enormous percentage of riders, much more than I've seen in other cities and towns, are listening to music on portable speakers wherever they ride. Is there a start to that? Is that a very common thing? Or did I just see a couple men and women doing this as a one-off thing?
I think that probably very much points back to the rag culture that I had noted before. And traveling cross states or cross country, Iowans bring those behaviors with them wherever they go. And that stretches out into the rural areas, and it goes back inwards into the urban core as well. So, nope, I don't think you had a unique experience. That's something that's somewhat common here, I'd say.
It was one of my favorite parts of riding in Des Moines, and just the variety of music you heard, and people, like you're saying, just belting as they rode down the street or through the park. It was a lot of fun. It made it an even more enjoyable experience. So, well, gentlemen, thank you both so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to seeing how Des Moines becomes an even more bike-friendly city.
We want to again thank our friends at igoelectric.com for their support of Around. Please visit them and check out their offerings. Also, remember to visit aroundonbikes.com and sign up for our weekly newsletter and read the full review of the bikes mentioned in our podcast, as well as other inspiring features about cities, e-bikes, and more.